Okay, so we'll get started. So the next couple of hours, I think we're going to talk a little about how to ace a data science interview. In general, the data science interviews are slightly different from other interviews. They're essentially, um, I mean, if I may say, they're slightly trickier than regular interviews. Not that they're very different, to be honest. There are a couple of rounds are slightly different. The questions are slightly different. The approach to the interview is slightly different. So I think it's worth talking about what are the nuances of a data science interview and how would you typically um, attend an interview and prepare yourself for that particular interview. Um, so this is the agenda, 4-step agenda for this particular session. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time on each of these. I'll just talk about what the agenda is. I'm going to talk a little about the data science roles. Uh, I think it's important for us to understand what kind of role do you want to apply before even we talk about the kind of interview that you would take up. So we'll talk a little about what are the different kinds of data science roles that are available outside. Um, Again, there's a variety of roles that are there, and we'll talk briefly about it. Sometime later, we'll also talk a little about designations, and I'll talk about it at the end of the session. But this is specifically on the roles, type of data science teams, the type of work that they do. So that's what the first step is all about. So it's really critical that you understand what the company that you're interviewing for does. Else, trust me, you're going to get bored to death. So it's really important you do that. Secondly, about interview stages. Now, like any other interview, this interview also has its own few stages, and we'll drill down on how data science interviews work and what are the stages of the interviews. Just like every other interview, you have a telephonic round, you have a face-to-face round, and then you have a manager round and things like that. So you the format is more or less the same, but I think the content in each of these phases is very, very different from any other interview, so to say. So we'll talk about the interview stages. Two other important aspects: what kind of questions can you expect from an interviewer, and what kind of questions are you supposed to ask the interviewer? When I say you're supposed to ask an interviewer, it's of course not mandatory for you to ask these questions to the interviewer, um, but I think it's useful if you ask these questions to the interviewer, um, primarily because there are certain nuances in a particular role that you would want to understand even before you, uh, let's say even interview, or even if you want to take the interview process forward, or let's say if you how seriously you can judge how seriously you would want to take that particular interview. Okay. uh, Firstly, before I even get started, I think at this particular point, given that all of us are at the beginning of our transition into the field of data science, or it could also be uh, your beginning of your career as well. I'm not particularly sure about the variety of people that we have in the session currently, but irrespective of which phase of career you are in, I think. Um, it's important for us to understand that at this particular point, any interview experience is great interview experience, um, irrespective of the company that you're interviewing for, irrespective of the caliber of the company that you're interviewing for, irrespective of if you're going to take that job or not. Um, the more interview experiences, the better it gets, especially with data science, because it's all about confidence building. So with that, let's get started with the first one. Um, Types of data science roles. Yeah. So there are three types of data science roles, if I may say. Like or four. Let's three. The reason I mention it three is because two of these are more or less similar, and I'll talk about those. So the first is um, the kind of work that you're going to do in a data science company depends on what the company does in the first place. As a data scientist, you could be a part of a consulting team or a services team, let's say. Consulting your services is essentially there is a company that does technical consulting, or technology consulting, or let's say strategy consulting to another company, and you are a data scientist who is helping your client to solve a particular problem. Right? Let's say your typical services companies in India, or let's say abroad, any of your typical services companies, your IT giants, like let's say your TCS, Infosys, and so on, Accenture, CTS, Cognizant, they're all IT consulting services. While you have strategy consulting services, like let's say strategy consulting companies like your Bain, um, uh, like your Bain, McKinsey, Deloitte, and so on. So there are other companies that do strategy consulting for clients as well. So you could be a part of any of these companies. Like for example, you could be a part of a TCS, or let's say my role for that matter at Microsoft. I'm a part of the services division of Microsoft. So you are essentially a part of a technology team, or you're essentially a part of this particular company that provides technology services, and you would be solving the problems of another client of yours. Now, the work that you do here would require you to have certain skill set, and we'll drill down on what kind of skill set is required for a data scientist in a consulting company, as opposed to the skill set that is required for other roles. Before that, we'll just walk through the 4 types of roles. The second role is specifically around your a captive or in-house data science teams. Like for example, let's say you're a telecom company yourself, and you would want to hire a data science team, and you're going to be a part of the telecom company itself, and the data science team, let's say, helps solve problems for this particular data science team. Data science team helps solve problems of that particular company itself. Let's take the example of AT&T or Verizon or any of these telecom giants in the US, or let's say any company for that matter. Take the example of Amazon, take the example of Facebook, or any of these companies. You are an in-house data science team, you're a captive data science team. There are no fixed responsibilities you have. You would essentially be helping different divisions in your organization to solve problems. So you would more or less be acting like a center of excellence within your organization. So various teams reach out to you and say, look, we have this particular problem, can you solve it for us? Look, we have an issue with let's say the kind of feedback that we're receiving from customers, can you help us mine this particular piece of text? So that's the second kind of problem, a second kind of roles that you would generally be a part of. The third is product development companies. Product dev is your typical company, typical teams where, let's say, for example, companies like Amazon or Microsoft, or let's say Google for that matter, they build small products. Let's say Google is building Google Maps. You are a data scientist that belongs to the Google Maps team, which means that which essentially means that you are somebody who's a part of the Maps team alone. Your work is curtailed to the Maps division only, the Google Maps division only, and then your work is very, very specific to that particular team. So all the problems that you would be solving will be specific to that particular product, and you're responsible for deploying that particular piece of work that you do, and monitor it and fine tune it, and so on and so forth. So the life cycle is very much like any product. And the life cycle is more or less like your like your typical the life cycle of a product is the role of a data scientist is kind of aligns with the life cycle of a particular product in the case of product development teams. Last but not the least, I think the most important thing is research teams, and these are essentially the stalwarts in any domain, right? These are research teams. All your major IT companies, all your major digital companies would have a research team, And the responsibility of these research teams, of course, is that they are ultra technical, they're super strong, they work on bleeding edge, cutting edge technologies, they are and they work at their own pace, right? So that's essentially what the research teams essentially are all about. Now, let's talk about each of these in more depths. Let's talk about the first one, and we'll try to draw some differences between one role to another role. Let's take the example of the data science consulting teams. Consulting or services teams are expected to have, of course, across these four teams, the primary skill set is machine learning, and machine learning data science will remain to be the primary skill set. That's the core to which everybody hangs on to. But each of these roles differentiates itself from the type of work that you're going to do and the ancillary skill set that you will have to build around it. So, for example, for a data science consulting team, one of the most important skill sets that they need to have is communication skills. Every data science consultant should be very, very well conversant. They should have the ability to A, converse with the customer, B, empathize with your client, because you should be able to understand the problem of your customer and then translate that problem into a data science problem, translate a business problem into a data science problem. I'll give you an example. So the role of a data science consultant essentially is that the data scientist, the business, have a conversation with the customer, and let's say with the customer of yours could be, let's say, a diamond mining company in let's say somewhere in Africa. The reason why I quote that is because that's one of the problems that I'm currently solving. So let's say you are talking to a diamond mining customer in Africa. They have no idea about what data science is. So you just cannot go there and start talking about regression and classification and machine learning and so on, because they honestly don't care, right, how you solve the problem. So your responsibility is listen to them, and their problem could be, well, you know what, one of the biggest problems that we have in our businesses is that our heavy equipment in our mine tends to break down very often. So one of the challenges for our business is if we can reduce those downtimes or reduce the number of failures that occur to our components, then we should be able to improve the efficiency of our plant. This is their business problem. The business problem, quote unquote, is that there are a lot of downtimes, a lot of failures that are happening to a particular equipment in a plant in somewhere in Africa, and they've reached out to let's say you, who's a machine learning expert, who is, let's say, a consulting company, and they would want you to solve that problem. But there are numerous ways of solving this particular problem. One of the approaches of solving this particular problem is, okay, as a data scientist, if you were there, or let's say as a technology consultant, if you are there, you are expected to ask a few questions. What kind of data is being captured? Okay, we see that sensor data of the equipment is being captured. Great. Do you also capture the failures of the equipment? Let's say they say, yes, we capture the failures of the equipment as well. So using the sensor data and the failures information, we may be able to build a classification algorithm which would essentially help us predict, based on the sensor readings, it would help us predict, will there be a downtime or not? Will there be a component failure? Yes or no? So we are essentially solving a classification problem here. So this transition of a business problem into a data science problem is what a data science consultant is supposed to do. That's exactly where his or her role is super, super critical, right? So that's the first and the most important thing. As opposed to, let's say, a captive data science team, or a data science team which is inside a particular organization, solving problems for that particular organization alone. The thing about that person is that, let's say you are a part of a telecom company or an insurance company, and let's say you are a part of let's say an election campaign for, let's say, one of the presidential candidates. You are as a data scientist, you are expected to understand your domain in and out very well. In the earlier case, you don't really have to be a master of the field, right? Master of the domain. You don't have to be a master of the mining domain. And if you know the mining industry, that's great. But if you are, let's say, a data scientist who's sitting inside that mining company, or he's sitting inside a particular who's working for a mining company and is hired for that particular mining company, then you are expected to be a master of the mining industry. You have to essentially learn the industry very, very well, understand the intricacies very well, and then based on that particular based on that particular value of that particular understanding of yours, you're expected to solve data science problems. So because now you're an insider, understanding the business issues and understanding the problems that people face in the field is much easier. So hence the responsibility of a data scientist in a captive data science team is slightly different from that of a consultant data science. Both of them solve data science problems, of course, but while a consultant data science is essentially looking at solving data science problems as a point solution, as a captive data science team, you are expected to solve data science problems in a much more holistic manner, because you are in that organization, you are aligning yourself to the aims and objectives of that particular organization. So you do slightly more than to what a data science consultant does. Data science consultant, on the other hand, gets the opportunity to work on different kinds of problems, different clients, different problems, small engagements. So the variety is much larger, but the data science consultant doesn't have the ability to stick to a problem and work for a longer duration on that particular problem, as opposed to a data scientist in a captive data science team or an in-house data science team, who will have much larger time and much larger amounts of time in his hand to solve a particular problem. But the problem is you might not have a lot of variety in the work that you do. So that's the captive data science team. Both are great. Both are amazing. One where you have fast pace, a lot of work, different kinds of work. Second, where you get to see a problem getting solved end to end, right from ideation all the way until actually deploying it and monitoring it and seeing how well it works and things like that. So yeah, so those are the first two roles. Let me tell you this: research teams, will come to product development in a minute. Research teams are essentially out of our league. I think I'll go to the extent of saying that. The reason I say that is because getting into research teams requires us to have a lot of academic background. So if you're someone who's doing a PhD in AI, then probably you're someone who can walk into the field of walk into a research team. And the reason I say that is not because you're supposed to have a degree to get that particular role. No, that's not why I say that. The reason I say that is because you should have the ability to sit and work on one problem for a few years to get to the solution. So it requires a patience. It requires some method to the madness. Research, it is very, very research oriented, very, very slow paced work, but you will be working on cutting edge stuff that probably nobody is currently working on. So it requires a lot of skill set in terms of a lot of depth in the skill set, but you might not see you might not be able to churn out solutions as fast as, let's say, how the data science consulting teams or, let's say, in-house data science teams do as much. So the work could be far more slow paced in a research team, and the requirements are much, much larger. The third and a slightly interesting role is being a part of the product development teams. Let's say, for example, I'll tell you the kind of work that you will be encountering. Let's say, I don't know if you're familiar with this particular feature, and I'm going to show it to you right now. So in PowerPoint, right? So if you click on design, and if you click on right side design ideas, if you see this, it automatically pops up various designs that I could possibly set up for this particular various layouts that I could use to present this particular content. Right? How do they do this? And who's doing this, for all you know? who do you think is actually solving this particular problem, right? In general, the kind of people who solve this particular problem are data scientists. Of course, this is a data science problem because I will have to automatically identify which layout to match to the content that I see here. So it's definitely a data scientist. Also, to the extent of what images should I put, right? What images should we put here? Product development and data science and things like that. So if you see, you generally have relevant images also that come up here. So this is definitely data science work, right? For sure. But who's doing this? So this is essentially done by a data scientist who is a part of the Microsoft PowerPoint team. So there are a lot of data scientists that are available outside. One of the data scientists who's working on this particular feature could be a data scientist who's aligned to the PowerPoint team at Microsoft. Similarly, you would also have a lot of other products. We're using, let's say, this particular tool called GoToWebinar, and there could be a lot of AI implementations that is happening in the background. Like, for example, there could be a team which is working specifically on monitoring the logs of this particular tool. Who would be doing it? It could be someone who is a part of it could be someone who's a part of the GoToWebinar, let's say, product team who's going to sit down and evaluate, analyze, and things like that. So Pradeep says it is more of design and programming rather than data science. Well, not really. There is definitely data science, because you, of course, will have to build the solution that could map this particular slide to a new design. So there is definitely a lot of data science that is associated with it. But the thing is, you are aligned to a particular feature. You're trying to hone that feature. You're trying to make that feature more smarter by the day. You're essentially trying to ensure that a particular product is built really very well, and embedding intelligence into one particular product. That's what that is what you're working towards. So, say for example, a lot of us, let's say, are using Zoom over Zoom or Teams to communicate. So suddenly you see this background thing that's coming up, right? So you could automatically change the background of where you're sitting when you're casting your video. You could change the background. So who's doing that work? Automatically removing the background. It's essentially a part of a computer vision exercise. It's called as background deletion. Or background differencing. So you can automatically identify the background, and you can blur the background, or you can add some background to your video and things like that. All of that can be done. Who would be doing it? It is essentially again done by a data scientist who is a part of, let's say, Zoom's team. What is the best part about being in a product team? You can see the features that you build go out very well. I mean, you could definitely experience the products that you build. So you are building AI product, quote unquote, right? But what's the drawback of it? One of the drawbacks, I wouldn't say a drawback. The thing is, your work can get a little mundane. Your work can get a little repetitive beyond a certain point, because you're solving the same thing continuously. You're trying to improve the same product continuously. So a lot of things that I get to hear from a few people is that the work there could get a little repetitive. So yeah, those are the different types of those are the different kinds of roles that are available. Sumil Ahmed, data science consulting services role would be more of a business analyst. I have a particular slide where I talk about different roles, and so there are different terminologies and different roles. I will get to that when we talk about it. But no, these are not the same. If you're a data scientist, you're a data scientist. The term data scientist, data analyst, and business analyst are not one and the same. So let's not confuse them to each other. So when you're in data science consulting or data science services, you're still a data scientist. You still do data science work. The term business analyst is a very loosely used term across the industry, and we'll talk more about that particular term when we get there. But no, you're still doing data science work here. Cool. Okay, so I hope we all understand the different varieties of roles that are available. If you have any questions on this particular slide, if you have any specific questions on the kind of roles that we have here, please drop your questions. I'm going to hold here for a couple of seconds before I move on. Okay. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to move ahead then. Do you also have ML ops roles? Good question. Okay. So ML ops is not a role. Let's put it that way. ML ops, just like how DevOps is, ML ops is not a role, if I may say. ML ops is essentially a way you deliver a machine learning solution. So I think it's something. ML ops is something that a data scientist is expected to understand and deliver solutions in that particular fashion. However, there is a bridging role between a data scientist and, let's say, a DevOps called as machine learning engineer, ML engineer. It's a role that is not pure play data science. That is not DevOps. There is a bridging role, basically a particular person who takes data science models and then deploys them, or performs the deployment for deployment and scaling of data science solutions. So there is a person called as a machine learning engineer in a certain organizations, and they are the ones who generally perform ML ops. Or one of the primary responsibilities of them is to perform machine learning ops. So I don't think we should concentrate, or we should base our if you're looking for a data scientist role, I think in most organizations it would be clearly called as data scientist. Please do not be swayed by the terminologies of ML ops. So are you supposed to learn ML ops? Well, learning ML ops is useful, but is it important right at the beginning when you're moving into the field of data science? I don't think so. You can learn it on job. You can learn it as you move along. So yeah, hope that answers your questions, Bharat. Okay, so I have a few more questions. Is it true that, okay. Okay. What are the tools we're expected to have? Good question. And I'm going to talk about the tools in a minute. So as far, okay, let's actually answer it right away. So in each of these roles, the kind of skill set, the kind of tools that you're expected to know, right? In general, as a data scientist, the tools that you're expected to know are, let me just open this up. As a data scientist, you're expected to know these tools. First is, let's say, a statistical analysis tool, or a statistical, like let's say a Python or R, statistical analysis or machine learning tool, right? ML tool, Python or R, whatever. If you know both, then that's even better. But yeah, anything is okay. Second is, currently between Python and R, most people are tending towards Python. That's the market trend. Majority of the work that I do also is towards Python at this particular point in time. I'm not saying that knowing only one of these tools is good enough, but I think the way the things are moving towards, the way things are moving ahead, currently majority of the work that we're seeing is towards Python than R. So knowing Python is useful. The second is SQL. SQL is super important. The reason why you need to know SQL is because you should have the ability to interact with different data sources, right? It doesn't matter which form of SQL you know. If you know, let's say SQL Server, T-SQL, or Oracle SQL, doesn't matter. You need to essentially learn SQL. I would say it's a mandatory skill to have to move into the field of data science. If you do not know SQL, and you don't have to be a master of SQL, right? You just need to have the experience of, let's say, doing doing some group bys, doing some select queries, writing at least some merges and joins, and you should basically have the concept of how SQL and databases work. So that is important. So SQL is super critical. Third, of course, is your understanding about the field of big data. Right now, I'm not saying that you should be well versed with big data, but you should have the ability to understand big data. Okay, the ecosystem, how does big data work, how does Hadoop work, and how will I get impacted if I'm working on big data? And if possible, you can also have some if you have experience on Spark, PySpark or Spark, that doesn't mind. That should essentially help. So these are mandatory skills for any data scientist, right? You should have exposure to Python and R. You should know SQL. You should know some understanding about big data, some basic understanding about big data. I'm not asking you to be a master of big data, right? Other skills to have, right? Other skills to have, of course, is, let's say you are working, let's say, heavily into deep learning, right? You're becoming a deep learning expert by the day. So that's where skills like, let's say, your TensorFlow or PyTorch or any of that come into picture, right? These tools also could come in handy, right? A TensorFlow or PyTorch will also add to your profile. But for you to be call yourself a data scientist, these are really critical. The skill sets that you see on the top are really critical, a tool set essentially. Apart from this, you should have exposure to Git, right? You should be able to do Git versioning. You should be able to some basics of Git, right? How to check in code, how to let's say how to check out a piece of code, how to push, how to pull. What are the basics of Git? Now this skill set of Git is not only required for data science, right? It is required for any IT job that you want. So please learn Git irrespective of wherever you are. So Git is useful. Version controlling systems. So in short, these are the kind of tools that you need to know. If let's say you are someone who is and again this particular skill set is common across the roles that we have here, right? We've seen captive data science teams, your regular data science teams, product development teams, or let's say research teams. The skill set or the tools is more or less the same. Now the depth in which you're going to work is going to vary from one tool to another tool in each of these, but the tools that a data scientist will use across the four is more or less the same. 90% of it is more or less the same. It's a commonality in that. Hope that answers your question, Ajay. Okay. Let's move on. Let me ask another question. Let me look at another question. Okay, so good question again. Which role is easier for you to get into as a fresher? As a fresher, if you ask me, the first two are relatively easier for you to get into. Getting into a data science consulting team as a junior data scientist could be much easier than, let's say, getting into a product team or let's say a research team. Let's not talk about that. I think getting into a captive data science team or let's say a product team, it is easier to get into a services company as a junior data scientist, right? I think that's easier. Is it true that it will be better to work as a data analyst before getting in? Not true. Actually, that isn't true. I mean, I think that the person who would have mentioned a statement like that, I think the thought process there is that if you work as a data analyst, you would have the ability to understand data, slice and dice data. You would have worked with SQL. You would have done some kind of visualizations and stuff like that before. Hence, it would be easier for you to transition into the role of data science. But that doesn't mean you have to work as a data analyst before you become a data scientist. I unfortunately disagree with that statement. I don't think that is mandatory. What is the primary difference between a data analyst and a data science role? So I'm going to talk about those designations and those and differentiating between those roles in a bit. So Rashmi, hope I will answer your question, and it'll be very, very clear if we, in a few minutes. Yeah. See, all the roles are very good. Which role is better? Is this role better or that role better? Honestly, all roles are better. I think what you need to look out for is, what do you want to do? Do you want to work in a company, in a company, solving all the problems of that particular company, or do you want to work for a particular company that has the ability to um, interact with other customers and solve various problems? So the first one gives you variety. The second one, you're essentially in the journey of a particular company's progress. Third, you are building a product. So you have to decide what you want to do, and based on that, you can decide which role you want to have. Yeah. Okay. I see a couple of personal questions. I have a mechanical engineering background. I worked in the IT. I think let's take that question offline, Milind, if that's okay. Because any personal questions, any specific questions, I'm happy to answer after the session. In which area? Tableau and Power BI. Good question. So Tableau and Power BI, actually come in as visualization tools, right? So for example, here, so you and I, as a data scientist, we are responsible for building all of these solutions, while we are responsible for building um, data science solutions. Power BI comes in as another tool, which is basically an addition to these tools, right? In addition to these tools, there is Power BI or Tableau or ClickView and things like that. So what are these needed for? These are reporting tools, reporting or visualization tools. So for example, a lot of companies have, build, a lot of companies build, what do you call it? Monitoring dashboards where they monitor sales, where they monitor, let's say, their revenues and so on and so forth. So from a piece of data, they take that data and they create charts and they perform dashboarding. It's called as reporting and business intelligence, BI and reporting, right? BI and reporting is not what we do. We go beyond BI and reporting. What BI and reporting does is, BI and reporting essentially looks at historical data and plots. That's about it. It tells you what has happened in the past. What data science does is, data science tells you what is likely to happen in the future. So we learn from the histories of the past, learn from the patterns of the past, and apply that on current data to predict what is likely to happen in the future. So your regression classification problems are essentially what is likely to happen in the future. Hence, Power BI and Tableau are specifically tools for people who are working in the field of reporting and analytics, reporting, um, business intelligence, and things like that. You will often find data science roles which expect you to have Power BI and Tableau expertise. This is not a mandatory experience to have. Trust me, you don't need this to be a data scientist. It is good to have. I mean, if you are a data scientist, if you know how to build Power BI reports, it's okay. I mean, if you know how to use Tableau, it's okay. But it is not mandatory for you to know Tableau or Power BI to become a data scientist. Okay. So if you see that anywhere in the job description, see, understand one thing: people who put job descriptions are HRs, and they probably, and let's give the benefit of the doubt to them as well, they don't understand what the roles are. They don't understand where Power BI is supposed to be used, where Tableau is supposed to be used, where Python comes in, how is NumPy different from scikit-learn. They don't understand all these intricacies. Forget about them. We don't understand it even now. So don't expect them to be. So that's the reason you'd see that the job descriptions could be extremely detailed, and there could be a lot of information in there. If it's data science, you need to have the skill set that I mentioned on the left side. The ones on the right, at least the Power BI and Tableau is not mandatory. How can we increase the chances of getting hired? That's a very, very generic question. I'll answer that later on. I mean, I'll answer it during the course of the session. So stay put on it, and then we'll be able to answer it. So I'm going to take one last question before I move on. And I'm going to pick which question. I see some questions about AWS and Azure ML. Okay, cool. So okay, AWS and Azure ML, is it important for you to have a AWS and Azure ML experience? The answer is, it is good to have. Again, it's basically an add-on. It's a plus plus. So what AWS and Azure ML are basically, AWS and AWS SageMaker or Azure ML, Azure Machine Learning, are tools, are cloud-based tools that will help us operationalize and deploy predictive models easily. Now, does it have anything to do with data science? No, it has nothing to do with data science. When I say that is, is it a tool that will help me build a better model? No, they're not those. They're whatever models you're going to build in your Python notebook or Python on your machine is essentially what you're going to build there as well. But those are tools that will give you two things. One, or actually three things. One, it will tools like AWS and AWS SageMaker and and let's say Azure ML, they give you one, compute, meaning if you want larger machines, they provide you that. They provide compute. They provide an organized way of maintaining models, model management, organized model management. That means if you, let's say your company builds many models, right? Let's say there are 10 or 15 different models that your organization is building. Then in that particular case, your company can leverage any of these tools to help to monitor the models and then to maintain these models well. The third thing that it gives is deployment capabilities. Right, these tools help us deploy models in a much more efficient fashion. So that's what your AWS or Azure ML give you. Is it important for you to know these before you crack a job? No. Your job interviews are not based on any of these three tools, any of your skill set on Azure ML or AWS. If you know it, then that's great. I mean, if you don't know it, I would not suggest you to fret about it. Cool, perfect. So Radha and Badrinath, again, I'm going to do these personal questions later on. I think, yeah, there are too many personal questions, specific questions about your expertise and your role. I will do that at the end of the session. If there are any generic questions about the role, I mean, roles in general, I'm happy to answer. But if these are questions about what your skill set is and stuff like that, what role to pick up for yourself, I'm going to do that at the later part of the session. Okay. Cool. Okay, let's move on. What is a platform that is generally used? Between AWS and Azure ML, both are equally used. So you can pick either. I'm in Microsoft, so I might say Azure ML. But I mean, honestly, both are equally good. I don't think you should pick any one of the two. Both almost have the same skill, same capabilities. So very hard to separate. Yeah. Or PySpark or Anaconda. Okay, when you say PySpark or Anaconda, see, PySpark and Anaconda are two different things. PySpark and Anaconda are completely two different things. PySpark is used for building predictive models in Spark, right? PySpark is essentially a tool for building models and slicing and dicing large volumes of data. While your Anaconda is just a platform that helps. It's a Python platform. It's a Python distribution. So it just provides Python for you, nothing else. Yeah. Jupyter or PyCharm, neither. VS Code, Visual Studio Code is the next best thing, or rather the best thing that is available outside today. So if you want to use Jupyter, you can use Jupyter. I would not suggest you to use PyCharm. Use Visual Studio Code. That's the best and the most lightweight tool that is available outside today. Anyways, let's move on.